Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the opening press briefing for the IATA Annual General Meeting and World Air Transport Summit. My name is Tony Consul. I'm the Head of Communications at IATA. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here. I'm joined here on the panel by Pieter Elbers, CEO of IndiGo, our host here in Delhi this year, as well as the Chair of the Board of Governors, and Willie Walsh, the Director General. We've had lots of speeches already this morning, lots of good content. So I think we'll go directly into questions. Please, can I ask you to focus the questions on industry issues, not airline-specific issues? And please raise your hand to indicate you want to ask a question. And when you're recognized, please also state your name and affiliation. So with that, who would like to ask the first question? Maybe we'll go in the front row here.
Hi, thank you. Leonard Berber from the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera. You lowered the revenues since December 2024. Is that minus 20 billion US dollars a direct impact of the tariffs, of the global uncertainties caused by the Trump administration, or can you give some details on that?
Yeah, and Murray will give a presentation on the outlook and give more detail. But basically, it's a combination of factors. We're looking at slightly lower growth, but still very healthy growth at 5.8%. So RPKs are down. I've made a point to some people yesterday. The fuel price is down, and if you look at it historically, there's always a direct correlation between the fuel price and ticket prices. So when the fuel price goes down, ticket prices come down. So it's a combination of factors that contributes. It's not, I don't think it's a significant amount, and obviously the fall in revenue is then offset by the reduction in the oil price principally. So that's how we end up with the same net result of around 36 billion. But it's a combination of factors, slightly slower growth, slightly lower fares as a result of lower oil prices, and that's why we've reduced the overall revenue outlook from just over $1 trillion US to 979 billion.
Okay, great, thank you. Just a reminder, the press release with the outlook has been distributed. If you haven't received that, please let us know. And we will be having a press briefing here with our chief economist at lunch for if you have any particularly detailed questions on the outlook. Question here in the third row.
Chris Jasper from the Daily Telegraph. Your comments on net zero really suggest that you're getting rather exercised about the EU stance in particular, and I think what you termed them sort of heaping measure upon measure on a regional basis. Do you think you can get through to them in any meaningful way in terms of easing up on you a little? And is it beginning to put net zero by 2050 in doubt in any sense?
I don't think 2050 is in doubt at this stage. As I said in my comments, we still have time. My criticism of the EU is several-fold, but the principal criticism recently is because of their mandate to include SAF, what we've seen is the fuel suppliers have used that as an opportunity to add what they're calling a compliance fee, which in effect is an additional fee that they're charging airlines to offset any potential risk going forward that the fuel companies encounter in relation to the cost of SAF. And what we've seen is that's added about $1 billion to the price that airlines are paying for fuel in the EU. So the EU's mandate, fuel blend mandate, has done nothing to stimulate additional production, but has done a lot to enable the fuel suppliers to increase their charges and therefore increase costs to airlines. So we've always argued that mandating something that doesn't exist makes no sense. And we've been highlighting what's been happening in France for some time, where they've had a fuel blend mandate, but the SAF has not been available in the French market. The fuel suppliers who are required to provide it don't care. because they will be subject to fines, but they're just passing on the cost of those fines to the airlines, and we have no choice. They're in effect monopoly or quasi-monopoly suppliers, so we have no choice but to take the fuel that they provide us. It's not complying with the mandates that are required. The fuel company is being fined as a result, but they're just passing those fines on to the airlines. And that's the point that we've made. That you need to consider the policies that you're introducing and test them for the outcome that you're witnessing. So there are people who say these mandates are positive because they stimulate production. We don't see any evidence of that. What we see is these mandates are not being met, and therefore the people who are required to fulfill the mandate are being fined, but they're happy to accept those fines and just pass them on to airlines. So consumers, at the end of the day, are paying more because airlines are facing higher fuel charges and there's zero environmental benefit. So the targets that the EU have set, we don't believe are capable of being met because of where production is in the EU today. And it's not just IATA, it's also reflected by, I think, pretty much every European airline CEO that I've spoken to, who many have made commitments to go beyond the 5%, but are now struggling to see where they're going to get the SAF that they require to fulfill the commitments that they have made, or to fulfill the obligations under Refuel EU.
We'll take a question in the front row.
It's John Mulligan from the Irish Independent. Willie, you name-checked a few airports this morning in your speech, and taking you back to your hometown of Dublin, where the airport has a passenger cap, and I know you've spoken about it before, but interestingly, of course, India is one of the countries that Dublin would like to have a direct link with. Brazil is as well. That passenger cap has obviously affected the airport in terms of what it's able to do. But are you disappointed that 6 months after new government came in, that it made a promise to get rid of that cap at Dublin Airport? Dublin Airport is a significant transatlantic hub within Europe, and that cap still exists today. What do you think about that it's still there? And does it reflect a kind of broader complacency, or even worse, resistance, I suppose, within Europe to the expansion of aviation?
Yeah, I'm disappointed that 18 years after that cap was introduced, it's still in place. Dublin Airport has had plenty of opportunity to remove the obligations under the cap, which, as you know, is a road access restriction. It's nothing to do with the number of passengers at the airport. It's total madness that at Dublin they've invested in building additional runway capacity, which they cannot use because they have a cap on the number of passengers, which is based on road transport access to the airport going back to 2007. And it clearly is having an impact on traffic growth at Dublin, particularly attracting new airlines into Dublin, where it's a big commitment for an airline to launch a new long-haul route especially. And if there's no certainty about being able to get slots for the following years, it's highly unlikely that airlines would be prepared to commit very valuable assets. And I contrast what's happening in Europe with what you're seeing here in India. Pieter can tell you, here aviation is just creating so much opportunity. And you come to a country like this and you see the investments that the government is making in airport infrastructure, and the investments that the airlines like IndiGo and indeed Air India are making in new aircraft for the future. It's night and day compared to what we see in Europe, where aviation and the benefits of aviation, I think, are taken for granted. But you're not going to get those benefits if you insist on putting in these artificial caps that will restrict the ability to grow. Pieter, I don't know if you want to add in.
No, not much to add. You'll see what's happening in the country, where aviation is still, I would say, in a stage of significant development. And I'm not sure if Willie would agree, me quoting a former Director General, but I personally like very much the quote Tony Tyler always used: aviation is a force for good. And I think that's very much embraced here in India itself, where a lot of new airports are being created, where infrastructure and airports are being seen as an integral part of a holistic vision on employment, economic development and progress. And that perhaps was the case in Europe years back. Clearly the setting has changed, and here in India, I would say it's part of a holistic story, and the welcome and the support we're getting, not per se financially, but in terms of vision, moving it forward, and creating a framework and an operational sort of settings, allowing us to grow and making sure that, and ICAO has done some of those statistics, every rupee or every dollar invested in aviation is creating 3 rupees or $3 in return. So every job for aviation translates into 6 jobs in sort of surrounding other parts, and that parameters are being fully embraced and being seen as an integral part of moving forward. And the fact that this year we'll have a second airport in Delhi, a second airport in Mumbai, you think about it, the population of Delhi and Mumbai, and particularly Mumbai as the financial capital with a 2-runway airport for all this time, it's a sort of much awaited expansion of what's out there, and with a population which is still growing, with an economy which is still growing. And as it was shared yesterday night in the reception by the minister, India has taken over this week or last week. Japan is the 4th largest economy in the world, and by 27 it will have taken over Germany as the 3rd largest economy in the world. So against that backdrop, it's really very exciting and promising to see really how aviation is an integral part of that. And there's more to that, when we speak about cargo and operations, and all these parts are nicely gluing together in a more holistic vision on how to move the country forward, and aviation as a means to an end. And if you, even there, I would say on the European side, people love to travel anyway. And the entire drive for mobility, take a few years back when COVID was there, and we got all this prediction, traffic will not return, people will change their lives, will from now on only meet through video screens. Look what's happened, you all came here, right? So I think the entire philosophy and the drive for mobility, and be it for business purpose, be it for family purpose, be it for whatever purpose, will continue to be there. So I think it's a kind of, next to the economic and self-inflicted effects which it will have if you start to produce gaps, it in fact is sort of suppressing what's a very basic desire of a lot of people, namely the wish to travel.
Okay, maybe we'll take a question in the second row, and then we'll move towards the back of the room after that.
Hi, Christian Favaro from Valor Econômico in Brazil. My question is related to the Latin American market. I see that Latin America is the only market, the only region to see profitability decrease compared to 2024. And I was wondering to hear some comments from you about what's wrong in the region in your point of view, and if there is some specific countries who are struggling the most, and what can be done, and actually having some comments from the tariffs and in Brazil as well that you are kind of bolting out this time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a slight reduction, I think, from 1.3 billion to 1.1 billion, and it is based on several factors that are impacting. When we look at Latin America, we see huge potential there. The fastest growing domestic markets in the world, India, China, and the third one is Brazil. When you look at the rate of growth in these markets, they've been outstanding, with India growing at about 11.4% compound over the past 25 years. So it sort of reflects the opportunity that is here. But we see very significant opportunity in Latin America and Brazil in particular. I think it's only a matter of time before factors come together in favour of Latin America. I think one of the things that's challenged the industry there in the past has been the strength of the dollar, because obviously we're a dollar-denominated business, a lot of dollar costs, fuel, aircraft, and aircraft handling in many places as well. And if you look at the Latin American currencies relative to the dollar, they have definitely suffered, which makes it much more challenging for the airlines to generate consistent profitability. But I think it's a very, very exciting market. I think it's one, having gone through some restructuring, you've seen consolidation in the market there. I think all of the measures that have been taken now are going to be very sensible for long-term, better economic outlook for the industry and for the economies there. So I think this, I would describe this as just a temporary adjustment. I wouldn't read too much into it, to be honest with you. I still think it's going to be a healthy market. You know, we're looking at growth in Latin America 5.8%, similar to the global average. You know, it's not a bad performance.
Okay, we'll go towards the back of the room, maybe Dina.
Hi, good morning. Dina Kamen from the National in Abu Dhabi. A question, please. Willie, you said that earlier in your speech this morning that by the time we meet next year, you would like the industry to show more progress on sustainability. And I wonder if you can tell us some concrete and tangible action you would like to see by various stakeholders during the year, so that the conversation is different at the next IATA meeting and so that the needle is pushed forward. And if I may, just a second question, are you seeing any indications, signs, worries by airlines about potentially the increase in cost of airplanes due to US tariffs?
So some tangible actions, you know, and it's across a number of items. But if we look at Corsia, you know, we would like to see governments stand behind Corsia. I think reaching a global agreement was a very significant achievement. We've always recognised that Corsia is a very good first step, but it's disappointing to see many governments who signed up to it recognising that it would be the sole economic measure to be used in the context of decarbonising the industry, to undermine the credibility of that scheme by trying to introduce additional taxes. I think it's also important that we see more eligible units, Corsia eligible units made available. To date we only have one country, Guyana, who has made them available, credits available to the airline industry. We need other governments, all of which have signed up to Corsia, to fulfil their obligations to make the credits available to the industry. And I think that's important. It's one where a number of our board members expressed concern that there would be insufficient credits available for airlines to fulfil their obligation. I think if that happens, it's not going to be because the airlines have failed, it's because the governments who have, you know, introduced the Corsia system have not honoured their obligations under the scheme to make credits available. And obviously we would like to see greater clarity around the production of sustainable aviation fuels. I think it's important that countries that have introduced mandates stand back and reflect what those mandates have led to. You know, have they led to the stimulation of additional production, or have they led to, like the case of Europe as we've highlighted, merely increasing cost with no environmental benefit? So I think it's time for, you know, politicians to be honest about this. You know, we're all working to address the environmental footprint that we have. We're not working to provide windfall profits to fuel suppliers. But if the mandates are merely succeeding in giving more money to the fuel companies, well then these mandates have failed and failed miserably. So we need greater clarity around the purpose of these mandates, greater honesty around the reality of what's happening with them, and you know, governments to play their part, and not just governments, because to be fair, there are many around the world who are you know, playing a positive role. We need the aircraft manufacturers, you know, to get their act together in terms of the production of new aircraft. We need air traffic control, air navigation service providers, you know, to seriously address the inadequacies and the inefficiencies in the ATC system. We need everybody to start honouring the commitments that they've made with actions rather than words. And in relation to prices, this again was an issue that was discussed by the Board of Governors. Obviously our desired position would be that aerospace aircraft and aircraft engines be excluded from tariff regimes, and that we return to the 1979 agreement where they're exempt. It is a global supply chain. It's functioned very well. I think starting to unpick that by applying tariffs is going to become very complex. We haven't seen any evidence of it leading to increases at this point, but I think a number of key suppliers have indicated that it is something that they're looking at. Now, obviously, any development to increase the price of aircraft is going to be very much an unwelcome development by airlines, and will be resisted by airlines, because we will have to understand the justification behind any increase. So we don't want to see any of the manufacturers, any of the OEMs, any of the suppliers using tariffs as an excuse or an opportunity to increase their prices to the industry.
Okay, we'll come one row forward.
Yeah, Ian Taylor, Travel Weekly. Willie, just on the aircraft manufacturers and delivery delays, you talked about this in December quite a bit and said that IATA was considering legal action on the issue. I wonder if you could say what's happening, if anything, on that. And Eurocontrol has forecast this summer we'll see more delays than last summer without the issue being addressed. The biggest reason being understaffing, in particular air traffic control areas, but it's also urged airlines to operate realistic schedules, implying that unrealistic schedules are an issue. Is that fair?
No, it's not fair. It's a joke. You can imagine if airlines put out press announcements saying, our passengers don't walk fast enough. It's ridiculous. Eurocontrol trying to blame airlines for their failings. The reality of the situation is air traffic charges have doubled in Europe since 2019. Their performance has decreased. We're looking at an increase in delays that the industry will face because of inadequate preparation and inadequate resources being made available by air navigation service providers who think they know better than the airlines when it comes to what the capacity should be or how many flights are likely to be operated. So airlines are very open in terms of announcing their schedules. Everybody knows what the likely demand for air traffic in Europe is going to be. We need to see the air navigation service providers face up to their responsibilities to provide a safe and efficient and cost-effective air navigation system, particularly in Europe, which they have failed miserably to do. It is a concern to us that we're paying more and getting even more service. And on the issue of legal action, we're working collaboratively with OEMs to see where we can help one another to address supply chain issues, but we continue to evaluate whether there is any reason for us to look at potential legal opportunities. So we haven't done anything, but we continue to evaluate that as a potential option. Our preference is to work collaboratively with the OEMs and all of the suppliers to try and bring greater clarity to the problem and obviously work together to try and solve the problem if at all possible.
Okay, we'll take a question here.
Ashraf Al-Hadidi, Al-Ahram newspaper, Egypt. What's your opinion about the impact of continued supply chain issue in aviation industry, especially the growth plans and the economics operation of flights and the capacity?
So, Pieter can comment on this, but what's obvious is that the rate of growth in the industry has slowed down as a result of the supply chain issues. And that's being witnessed through a number of things. The growth is lagging behind the demand and has done for some time, which means that there are airlines that are missing out on opportunities to expand their networks and provide new options for their customers. It's led to the highest seat factors we've ever seen in the history of the industry. We're looking at load factors, seat factors in the order of 84% this year. That 84% average across a year tells you that there are times when everything is completely full. And that means there are customers who are not getting the opportunity to travel when they want to. or to travel to the destinations that they would like to travel to because everything is full. You know, I didn't think I would ever see load factors at that level. You know, we hit 81.6% in 2019, which I thought would stand as the all-time record. We've clearly gone way beyond that. So when you think about it, 84% on average across 365 days, including, you know, a wet Tuesday in February and the peak day in August. It's an incredible achievement.
Yeah, I think airlines all over the globe are facing exactly those issues, and the number of suppliers obviously are limited. And with a limited number of suppliers, it means that if there are some choking in the system, it affects pretty much everyone. And you know, some airlines can deal better with it than others, given their sort of order books or situations. But clearly, with the demand keeping on growing, and I guess post-COVID, everyone was thinking, you know, this is going to take 6 months, 12 months, maybe 18 months. But it's 25 now, and we're pretty much 3 years post-COVID, and there's no end of sight yet on when it's going to be addressed, which I would say is a missed opportunity in terms of addressing the market demand, and especially some of the very high and quickly growing markets.
Okay, take a question in the fourth row. Sorry, third row. Apologies.
Hello. Sorry, it's Rob Nightside from the Australian. What are the safety implications of the supply chain issues we're seeing, given that airlines are hanging on to aircraft for longer, there's delays with maintenance? Should we as travellers be concerned?
No, there's no safety issue at all. You know, what it means is it's an issue of inconvenience for airlines and an issue of cost, because the aircraft are taking longer to maintain, but they're all maintained to the appropriate and highest standards. So there's no safety implications at all in relation to that. As I said, the issue is that aircraft have to be taken out of service for longer than was expected. Turn times on maintenance are longer today than they were before because access to spare parts has been disrupted. Engine shop visits are taking much longer than they used to take. So it's an issue of cost and convenience. It's not an issue of safety.
Okay, take a question here.
Ranveer Nair from Media Group Paris. A couple of questions. First is, what is the situation of global talent availability for civil aviation? Has it recovered from the COVID shock when it was seriously suffering? And we can see some of that impacting, air traffic control systems, especially in North America. And secondly, don't you see that political will for sustainability, not just in aviation, is evaporating? Take US, take EU as step back from its 2035 mandate even for automobiles. So in this kind of scenario where political leaders are not really behind you, how will you achieve your net zero targets?
No, I think the longer term focus on sustainability remains. I think there is, as you would expect, often political issues and geopolitical issues impacting on some of the timing. But I think the direction of travel is still one that recognises that the environmental issues need to be addressed. Some countries had previously expressed concern about the pace at which we would address it. China, for example, for a long time had said net zero in 2060 rather than 2050. Some other countries had wanted to achieve net zero in 2040. So, settling on a 2050 date was principally on the back of the Paris Agreement to align with the science as identified at that stage. But it didn't mean that every single country in the world agreed that 2050 was the appropriate date to head for net zero. But the direction of travel, I think, continues to be towards addressing environmental issues. And certainly that's what we see, and it's what our customers tell us. All of the research that we have done, and we made that point today, highlights that our customers still want us to take action to address the environmental impact of aviation. and that's something I think we have to do, address the needs of our customers. And sorry, I missed the first bit, was in relation to the challenge
of talent availability, human resources.
Yeah, talent, sorry, it's a great question, and Pieter can tell you because he's recruiting every day.
I guess here, a bit similar to what I said earlier, the situation is different for different parts of the world. Here in India, I think we have an incredible pool of talent, not only in terms of range, but equally important in terms of ambition. So the talent pool, and that I think provides a huge opportunity. And coming back to some of the earlier questions, there's a lot of business, travel, but also MRO facilities, also creating new sort of opportunities in production facilities. You can change it overnight, but with some of the steps being taken, I think here India is a great opportunity to start building an infrastructure which hasn't been here for some time when it comes for a cohesive system, for MRO facilities, for producing stuff here in India itself rather than importing it. And then if you have the will to do it, and you have that pool of talent to do it, I think the opportunity out there is huge. Because as we saw earlier, the overall outlook of IATA globally doesn't change. So if countries are choosing to embrace aviation as a force for good and see what it all can bring, then you can start building that ecosystem. And it's not unique in India, it's also happening in other parts of the world. We can clearly see it. I think another good example is Singapore, where it's all connected and the airport keeps sort of developing and progressing and implementing improvements all along the way. And so there's a couple of places in the world where you see that happening. And basically, as it goes in any business or industry, traffic and business would move to places where it's best to do business.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. So if we can keep the questions short and sharp, we'll try and get through as many as we can. We'll go to one here and then one over there, and then we'll move to the other side of the room.
This is Sangeeta Saxena, Editor, Aviation and Defense Journals. I wanted to understand one of the major challenges faced by the industry is blocked funding in various parts of the world. What is IATA doing to get that fund back to its airlines?
Yeah, block funds is a really challenging issue for the industry because for airlines, when you look at the financial performance of the industry with a net margin of 3.7%, we cannot afford to have funds trapped in countries where airlines are continuing to provide services. So obviously the ultimate decision rests with the individual airline because it's their money that's blocked. What we do is, we highlight to governments the risks associated with blocking funds because it's clear that an airline will not continue to operate into a country if it cannot repatriate its money because in effect it means they're operating there for free. So we have seen a significant improvement in the situation, which is positive. The amount of money blocked is down on where it was, but it's still a significant sum of money for an industry making such small margins. So I think the critical issue is that governments understand the risk that they're facing, that their economies and their consumers are facing if funds get blocked, because ultimately it leads to a reduction or withdrawal of services, and that clearly is going to be damaging to the economy and damaging to the citizens of the country if that were to happen.
Okay, question here.
Hi, this is Karishma here from Business Today. I'd like to get your view on how do you see prolonged geopolitical tensions, be it per se between Russia, Ukraine, or even unresolved issues of India-Pakistan airspace impacting global routes and airline economics in general?
Well, let me start and then Pieter can comment. Geopolitics has always been a factor in our industry. There's probably more of it at play today than I've seen, but in 46 years in this industry, geopolitics have played a part in every single one of those years. So it's not new. I could argue that it's something that airlines have become skilled at dealing with. We're a very resilient industry and we're very quick to be able to adapt to any change in the geopolitical environment. Obviously, we would prefer that these issues didn't impact on us. We would prefer that airspace is open to everybody, everywhere. But the reality of it is, where airspace is closed, we quickly adapt to find alternative routings for the industry to enable it to continue serving the markets and the consumers that we are.
Thank you, Willie. Yeah, I don't think there's much to add to what Willie is saying. Perhaps it's good to recognize some of the work IATA is doing in this respect. When these things are happening, IATA is stepping forward in terms of addressing the voice of the industry, which is important because it's not affecting just a single airline or a single country. It's usually affecting multiple airlines or multiple geographies, really, which are being involved by that. Well, specifically here, you're very much aware of where we are today and some of the recent things. I think there's an incredible resilience in the industry. So geopolitics is influencing, of course, routes and of course travels, but we see that either it's being resolved quick and then traffic returns very, very quick, or it's not being resolved quick and then alternatives are being found for either traffic flows or routings or things like that. So I would say the resilience of the industry, to build on what Willie just shared, is in fact what is the most sort of relevant part here, because it will be integrated in business fairly quickly and airlines adjust themselves accordingly.
Okay, we'll take a question over here.
Hi, Arindam from the Economic Times newspaper in India. And since both of you are present here, Willie and Pieter, my question is regarding India's expansion policy, and which has closely become borderline protectionism about granting of international flying rights to foreign carriers. Willie has spoken much about it, about how it doesn't serve a purpose. But are Indian Airlines and the IATA differing on views of expansion of international flying rights here?
So, flying rights are an issue right across the world. It's not unique to India. My own view has always been that India is looking at fantastic opportunity for growing its connectivity, not just domestically, which I think has been one of the really great successes of what has happened in India, particularly when you look at the services provided by IndiGo in the domestic market. But more importantly, it's now turning to global connectivity. I think it's one of the things we have commented on previously. When we look, I think 2, maybe 3 years ago, there were less than 50 wide-body aircraft based in India. For a country of this size, population of 1.45 billion people, to have less than 50 wide-body aircraft is astounding. That's now being corrected with the addition of new wide-body aircraft to both the IndiGo fleet and the Air India fleet. And as we see the expansion of the carriers in India accessing new markets, you will have to see a corresponding change to the approach for access, because Indian carriers will want access to markets right across the world and deserve to get access to markets right across the world. So I think this is just, again, an issue of timing.
I'm not sure if I completely heard your question when you said it was bordering what exactly?
Protectionism.
Let me give a few observations here. First of all, it's called the bilateral agreement, right? That means two sides have to agree on something. And if one side makes more and more noise, it doesn't mean that you're more and more right. It's a bilateral agreement, and that means that the two sides have to agree on what's the benefit for both sides. And if one side makes a lot of noise, it doesn't mean that the other side says, yeah, now we do it. That's one. Two, I think, and you are very much aware of that, there's quite a few recent changes in bilateral agreements. I think the government of India has stepped forward, made a couple of new air service agreements with different countries in different parts of the world. And so I would disagree with your bordering protectionism statement. I think the government of India has made quite a few new bilateral agreements with countries in the region. Historically, a lot of countries had flying rights to India, were using these flying rights, where Indian operators were not using these flying rights. I think that should be taken into consideration. consideration as well, would be my third point here. And there were a massive number of flights into India and no operations by Indian operators. So for a government to look at that and to say, first let's use the existing pool of traffic rights, and when the existing pool is being exhausted, go to new traffic rights, I think it's a completely fair and balanced approach in that. And again, I would invite you to look at all the recent agreements which have been made. There's quite a few agreements being made on expansion of those traffic rights.
Okay. We're coming up very close to 11:15, which is the end. We might try and squeeze in one last question, and maybe we go to the front row here. Short question, and
yeah, hi, I'm Pieter from the Free Press Journal newspaper. Willie, you mentioned about the damage to commercial aircraft and airports in conflict zones. So can you kind of reflect upon that by maybe some instances or any data if we have about the loss to the industry in such due to the tensions in such conflict zones?
The issue for us is that the global agreements and responsibilities is to protect civil aviation, and it's unacceptable for civil aviation to be put at risk as a result of disputes and conflicts around the world. And we made our views very clear to the UN Security Council based on threats to civil aviation that should not be happening. So it's very important that governments recognise their obligations and their responsibilities to ensure that civil aviation is not at risk either as a result of inadvertent activity or because of decisions that have been taken to target certain airports. And that's the way the global industry has functioned, that's the way the global industry should function, and we would expect that that's going to be an area where there will be further focus through ICAO as they address this in the forthcoming assembly in Montreal in September, October of this year.
okay, with that, we'll bring this press conference to a close. I invite everyone to go back to the plenary session where that's just getting underway as we speak. And again, we look forward to seeing you back here in this room with Marie Owens-Thompson, our chief economist, who will run through the outlook at lunchtime. So thank you all very much.